All right, team, how's it going? Now, every single diet methodology that exists, every single kind of diet plan, I don't just mean a meal plan, but I mean Weight Watchers, Slimming World, ketogenic diet, low carb, calorie tracking, like intermittent fasting, every single diet methodology has an intrinsic flaw because any kind of protocol that you follow is something that by definition is not your typical way of operating, because you as a person, you'll have a certain set of habits, beliefs, a certain mindset, certain behaviors. You'll do things that are automatic for you, or are the default ways of operating for you as a person. And when you follow a methodology, you're going outside of your standard operating procedures. Sounds like a computer. And you're following a new method to help you obtain a result. And that kind of, on the surface, sounds all right, except for because you're following a different methodology that's not your default way of operating, at some point when you finish that methodology, even if it's because you've obtained a result and you've followed that methodology and got something out of it, or you haven't because life circumstances change and it doesn't suit you anymore, whatever the reason might be, at some point you don't do that forever, because if you did it forever, it would be your default way of operating. So if it's not your default way of operating, at some point you have to revert back to your default way of operating. And that's why we see, and obviously this is shown in kind of all the research on this, like why it happens as well, but people will yo-yo diet. They'll go on a diet plan, they'll get some kind of result, they'll come off it, they'll either revert back to how they were before, or in a lot of cases, they'll end up worse. They'll have worse health markers, they'll have gained more weight, they'll have in perspective terms, or in a person's opinion, a worse body composition. So they think that the way to get that result again is to do that thing that they were doing before, and they'll go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and often never actually get anywhere, or end up in a worse and worse position. So taking this into account, what's the missing link? Like, it's the fact that we're doing something that's not our default for a short period of time. That can be okay, but the problem is what we revert back to, our default settings, how we operate, the way we think, our emotions, our behaviors. That's what's not actually giving us the result. And we're always going to come back to that because we can't stay on this methodology forever. So if we're always coming back to this default method, and that's where we revert back to, worse health outcomes, or a worse body composition, or our performance isn't as good, that's what needs addressing, right? So we have to look at what we do as our normal way of behaving, as opposed to looking at which diet plan should we follow, which tactics should we use to get a certain outcome. We have to look more at how we think, behave, feel, act, and our standard operating procedure when it comes to food and nutrition. So this is a difficult thing to do, because when we have a methodology and a diet plan, we've got a set of guidelines, we've got a set of rules, and that's what helps us achieve an outcome. And when we're just looking at our own intrinsic operating system, we don't have those same guidelines. So it feels a little bit like, I don't know what to do, like how do I achieve these results? I just feel like I don't know where to begin. So it's a difficult thing, and I appreciate that, and sometimes it can also be quite a frustrating thing, but it's the thing that's actually going to work. And so rather than putting our faith or our time, effort, money in all of these different things that may actually get a result but won't last and won't stick and won't teach us anything, we have to change who we are as a person. So we have to look at our operating procedure and updating our operating procedure, just like we would do with our computer and our phones. We upgrade or download the latest version, or download the latest software. We have to do that with our own body, our own mind, and upgrade ourselves and our thinking and our behaviors, beliefs, and our thoughts and knowledge, so that we can have a set of standard operating procedures for ourselves that help us get the results that we want without having to borrow someone else's phone and use a different system for a short period of time and then come back to our phone that doesn't really work very well. We have to upgrade our own computer, our own internal computer, our own brain. That's difficult to do, and it's not something that we can do over a video. So we can't sit here and me give you a bunch of answers, because it's really individual, because it comes down to your individual operating system. So what we need to do is have these conversations. We need to talk to people who can give an external perspective and who can start unpicking your habits, thoughts, behaviors, and beliefs to help you recognize what's not helping you, what's not serving you, and to then give you some guidance on what will help you, what will serve you. And now it does take time to form a habit, and it does take time to change a belief, but it starts with a belief that it can happen to begin with, because if that door is closed, then we're not going to be open to any suggestions about an alternate way of behaving. So we have to have a belief that this upgrading our system is going to help us. But once we've got that, we can then start looking at upgrading our understanding and our knowledge. Not just knowledge about nutrition and how it works mechanically, but understanding how it works within our psychology. So the psychology of nutrition and how we think about our decisions when it comes to food, how we are triggered to feel certain things and have certain emotions, how we use food as coping mechanisms, how we use food as fueling. And when we start to build up a really good picture, this is what we call our relationship with food. When we've got a really good picture and understanding of all the influencing factors that affect how we operate with regard to our nutrition, we become in a really good position where we've got all this data that we can go, I know that when I'm tired, this is what will happen to me. I know that when I'm hungry, this will happen to me. I know that sometimes I need to surf the urge. I know that sometimes I need to maybe eat when I'm not hungry. There's loads of different factors, but it comes down to you understanding yourself as a person and then developing the tools and tactics that work for you to get the outcome that you want. And this is something that has been shown in research as well. So at one point, this question was asked, what is the best diet plan that people can follow? Because every single diet plan that exists has got a bunch of people who it works for and a bunch of people who it doesn't work for. And if every single diet plan can say, yes, this works for some people, but also it doesn't work for other people, what does that tell us? Well, it tells us that actually it's maybe not the diet plan, it's maybe down to the person who's interacting with that diet plan. And so, like I say, this question was asked, which is the best diet plan? And when they've gone and kind of looked at all the data, they've realized that there isn't one particular diet plan that works best. The one that works best is the one that the person can stick to. And so this information in itself tells us that it's about the person and it's about you as a human being. Now, you might find a methodology that's out there that just happens to work really well for you, but the kind of next question is, for how long? Because at some point, if you stop following that methodology, typically people revert, and that's another question that people have asked. Why after 6 months or 12 months do people revert back? And it's because we haven't actually learned anything or adopted anything new within ourselves. We've just followed a protocol for a short period of time. So then that leads us on to the question, like, what is the missing link? And the missing link is putting the work in on ourselves, our own psychology and our own relationship with food. And I sound like a broken record because this is what I harp on about all the time, is this is where our attention needs to be, on our own psychology with food. But as I mentioned before, this is not something that we can overcome and figure out through a video because it's very individual and very personal. So what I'd encourage you to do is divert your attention, not get pulled in by a diet methodology, but start looking at your operating system, how you interact with food, and questioning a lot of it, like, why do I make these decisions? And don't be satisfied with the I don't know response. Why do I kind of, have this food at this time? Why do I overconsume this amount of food? Or why do I go to that food instead of this food? And instead of saying, I don't know, really, really dig deep into the questions why. And then secondly, let's talk to people who can help guide us with this, i.e. me. So for the Tough Cookie crew, this is where we need to have conversations. And I will continue to try and keep doing this with our check-ins and in sessions and everything like that. But I also encourage you to be open about it, to ask me questions, and to just constantly barrage me with thoughts about your nutrition and why they might be a certain way. And I will continue to bounce off you and bounce back with you about the different ways of thinking around nutrition that affect and influence your outcome. And then we can start to continue to do that to a point where we develop a way of being, a way of behaving, and a way of interacting with nutrition that actually works for you, changes your default setting, and so gives you the outcomes that you want, but that stays with you long term, forever, because it is now your default operating system. So please, let's think about this a little bit deeper, and let's start challenging some of those pre-existing thoughts and beliefs around nutrition, and let's have a lot more conversations about it as well.